Hey there, it's Olivia Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you a wrap up of 10 books that I have recently read with my thoughts and opinions on all of them. I'll have content warnings down below in case it's something you need or you want, but without further ado, let's get down to the 10 books that I've read and what I thought of them. So the first one I have a reading vlog of, and that's probably already gone live by the time that you've seen this, but that is Butter by Asako Yuzuki, which is translated from Japanese by Polly Barton. This is a literary fiction book that has taken the world by storm. I see everybody reading it all the time, and I wanted to see if I was going to enjoy it too and get in on that hype, and I really liked this book. Now, what it is about is a journalist who is investigating a woman who is on trial for committing the murder of several men, and what she does for these men is that she cooks them really good meals, and then suspiciously soon they end up dying. And it's about the journalist trying to investigate her and her personality and what she's like. Now, this makes it seem like it's a crime murder mystery kind of book. It's not that. It's not about the crime whatsoever, but what it's really about is about these two women getting to know each other and what they each learn from each other in that process. And so what this book is actually doing is commenting on what it means to be a woman in contemporary Japan. There's a lot of unpacking of misogyny, there's a lot of body shaming and fatphobia that is unpacked, a lot about appearances, a lot about food and diet culture and the expectations that women place upon themselves in terms of how they connect to men in relationships, and everybody else's thoughts on how women portray themselves in relationships. And so I found this to actually be a very insightful and interesting book because it really unpicks that and looks at that theme from every single lens, from every single aspect that it can do, while keeping that relationship between these two women who are on polar opposite sides of their thoughts and opinions, and how they discuss and how they talk about what could be a crime, what could not be a crime, in a very roundabout way. I really like that. That is to say that also there's a lot of food, as you can tell from the title, butter, at the heart of this novel, and I really enjoyed kind of cooking buttery meals while I read this book, but the lavish and exquisite descriptions of food definitely made me hungry while I was reading this book, so have a snack on hand. I think it was written really well, even though it's a very big chunky book. It's 500 and something pages. I wasn't really bored at any point. I feel like it managed to keep its pace and keep me interested with every turning page. I do think at the end there it got a little bit long, but not too badly. I was still happy to continue, and I found the ending very satisfying. I think when it comes to books that discuss women that also might have a little bit of a topic of like love and romance at its core, all books seem to end in the same way, and I appreciate where this one chose to end, and also just the final scene and what it meant, try not to give anything away, was quite impactful and felt very substantial, and I just had a very good time. Then I read a horror short story collection, so we have Bad Dolls by Rachel Harrison. I've been meaning to read Rachel Harrison for ages now, and I finally did, and I really enjoyed Bad Dolls. In Bad Dolls you get 4 short stories, and I would describe them more as haunting than outright horror. So of course there are horror elements. There's a magic 8-ball that seems to be saying more than the usual magic 8-ball phrases. There's creepy dolls that may be coming to life. There's blood sacrifices. So there are horror elements to this, but at its core these short stories are about these women who are in their late 20s, early 30s, and the real horror is that life is not going the way that they pictured. Maybe they're struggling with lifelong friendships ending even though they thought they would last forever. Maybe they're going for a breakup when they've been in a relationship for 4 years and they thought this was the person, but maybe it's not. And there's also a short story in here, the very last one, which deals a lot with grief, which is a subject I'm personally very interested in reading and unpicking and analysing, and I thought that was my favourite short story in the collection. I think it was a very real and a very honest depiction of grief and guilt and how that truly feels, and how horrifying grief related to guilt really can be when you're experiencing it. So I really liked that short story and thought it was done very well. Also just the way that it ties in these very contemporary themes with the horror elements was seamless. Rachel Harrison's writing style is very Moorish. Every time I read it I just wanted to read more and more and more, even though I don't typically read short stories back to back. That's what I wanted to do when I was reading this collection. Every single short story ended in what I think is the sweet spot, where it's a closed and definite ending to the short story, but there's a little bit of an ambiguity, there's a little bit of a something more that leaves you open to imagine, and I think that was the perfect place for each one of these short stories to end. Some of these short stories had a bit of a sapphic tinge to them, so if you want a little bit of a queer tone to some of your stories you can find that here. But yeah, Bad Dolls was a very good introduction to Rachel Harrison's work, and I will definitely be picking up a full novel of hers at some point in the future. I actually read another short story collection. I'm back on my short story high horse, and for that I read For Such a Time as This by Shani Akilah, and this is a short story collection of the Black diaspora in the UK. That's basically what this book is about, and they're interconnected short stories where you're following these people that are in a friends group or who are friends in some ways, and each one has their own individual short story and it's about what's happening in their lives. That's pretty much it. I have felt so seen while I was reading this short story collection, like incredibly seen as somebody who is living in the UK and is part of the Black British diaspora. Like it was very real. Like it was so real. You can tell that this comes from Shani Akilah's experiences and how she has felt living in the UK as one of the Black diaspora as well. There's a short story called For Such a Time as This, the titular short story, and I think that showed something about Black excellence but also Black exhaustion that I find very hard to articulate, but which this short story pulled together so well. The repetitive monotony of excelling again and again and yet not being good enough, that is really well depicted in this one. And there's a short story in this which is set in a particular place in Jamaica that I know very well, that's about someone losing their grandparent, that's kind of embodying a lot of the emotions that I was feeling at that particular time, and it's a two-parter and it struck so true that I felt like my soul was in the short story. I just cannot explain that experience, and that short story is in two parts in this collection. It's my favorite one because it's the one that really affected me the most emotionally, and if I had to rate this book on just that short story and For Such a Time as This alone, it would be a clear 5 stars, but the other short stories are just all so good as well. There's ones about grief, there's some about friendships, there's some about relationships, there are some about creativity, there's some that are sad, there are some that are hopeful, and the way that this book ends with that friend group all together, it just, wow, it did something to me, because there's something about those friendships where you can be your true self, where they see you, where they understand you and your authentic self, that are just so powerful and just so monumentous. And this short story collection actually just means so much to me for how good it is, but just how true it is. And this short story also cemented to me that I actually really like books that are written in second person. I've read Akilah Bazuma Nelson that does it well, and Kate Jemison does it well, and Shani Akilah does it so well here too. And it shows that the second person can be a very impactful and good narrative choice if it's used in the effective and right way. I would only say that the first short story in this collection is probably the weakest, so if you're trying this, keep reading. The first one is a little bit weak, but the rest are all just like brilliant, and so you're in for a very good time when you read this short story collection. Moving on, I was definitely in the mood for translated fiction, so I read Death on Gokumon Island by Seishi Yokomizo. Now, what you need to know about this book is, even though it's recently published in English, it is a classic. This is a Japanese classic murder mystery that was written several years ago, and it's set on this island where these sisters start dying one by one, and our detective who is coming to solve the case has been pre-warned by somebody else that this might happen, and so he's there to try and stop the deaths from happening and solve who is murdering these girls. Now, this is the second book in a murder mystery series where you follow the same detective solving all of the cases. However, this is the second book. I'm jumping in at the second book. You can do that. You can read them as standalones. I didn't struggle whatsoever for having done so. And I thought it was okay. I do think this one has quite a bit of misogyny and sexism in it that goes unaddressed. I think it's partly to do with the fact that it is a classic, so be aware of that going in. But mostly when I was reading this murder mystery, I was just along for the ride. I just followed what was happening. I do think I have a bit of a problem with Agatha Christie having ruined me for most murder mysteries, because the whole time I was thinking Poirot would have solved this by now, Poirot wouldn't have made these mistakes. But you know what, the detective here is not Poirot, and he feels a little bit helpless because he's been pre-warned that these crimes are happening, and yet he's so useless at stopping them from happening. It got really frustrating to me that he couldn't stop something that he knew was going to happen. But in terms of solving the case, he did a good job, and it was a like nice, slow and steady one. It's set on an isolated island, so you do get that small town, very gossip heavy, everybody knows everyone feeling to it, and it was nice to read something kind of just set in Japan with that culture woven through it, and I liked it. I just liked it, but I didn't really love it. I don't think it's something groundbreaking, and I just didn't enjoy the misogyny in it. So there's that. But it was a good enough read, and I didn't predict who the murderer was and why they were doing it, so there's that as well. I felt like I hadn't read a middle grade in a while, so I wanted to switch up and do so. I read October by Katya Balen. This is the second Katya Balen book that I read, and I just know that she's a good writer, and this proves it once again. She's a fantastic middle grade writer. This one is about October. She lives in the woods with her dad. It's just them two. She finds the main city too loud, too noisy, too overwhelming, and her mother left them a long time ago because she couldn't do their woodland living. But when her dad falls out of a tree and is severely injured, it means he has to go to the city because he needs to be in intensive care hospital, and she has to go and stay with her mum, who she hasn't lived with in years and who she really, really doesn't like. And I really enjoyed this. It's about October as she is going through a whole load of change, and you get to see that change from the child's perspective and how difficult it is when everything about your life is changing. The environment you're in, the people you're interacting with, where you are, it is quite mind-boggling for October to go through. And I have to applaud October for continuing to be brave again and again and again, and choosing to open up and be brave. It was just a beautiful journey to go on with her. And when her dad falls out of the tree, October rescues this owl who is abandoned and wouldn't have been able to make it if October hadn't rescued the owl. And you can see how October's journey of opening up to new experiences and going through all of this change is reflected in the owl's journey and how October is caring for that owl. And I thought that parallel and how that conversation is done between the two is just really perfect for children to be able to picture it in a very vivid and clear way, and to explain that metaphor a little bit more. What I also liked about this one is that you can see the emotions and what October is struggling with, and you can see how the adults just don't get it and how frustrating that is. And I think a lot of times as a child there are moments where you want to show your parents something but you don't know how to articulate it because you haven't learned yet, and this book really shows that in a way that felt very authentic, but also that parents reading it might be able to learn something from it too, because I definitely did as well. It also has a very nice depiction of friendship and goes to show how important friendships are when you're exploring a new place or you're in a new situation, and I really like that depiction of friendship. It was so wholesome and it made my heart swell, and so all in all I just really enjoyed reading October. It's a very good middle grade book, and I definitely need to read more Katya Balen and remember to do that. We're now halfway through this wrap up, so it's a good time for me to say thank you to my wonderful Patreons who are subscribed and support this channel. It really means so much to me, and I'm going to have a Patreon exclusive wrap up of my thoughts and feelings on the Ragpicker King by Cassandra Clare. So if you head over to my Patreon and you subscribe at any tier, you will be able to access that wrap up when it comes. So just mentioning that here. And now on to the other books. So the next book I read quite quickly was Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson. This is a horror novel, and I've actually read a Delilah S. Dawson book before, so this was my second one by her. And this one follows this young woman who goes to the market and she meets the market seller, who is absolutely stunning, and she never thought that she was queer before, so she's working through these emotions of being attracted to a woman so much for the first time. But the more that she gets to know this woman, the more she realizes that maybe not everything is what it seems, and that there might be something more sinister going on. I I enjoyed this, I had a good time, but I don't particularly think it's a long time. It's one of those books where everything happens at the end, so you've got to be incredibly patient as you work through the story to get to the big banger of an ending where everything crescendos and everything is built towards. But when I got there, I felt like I didn't need such a long lead up to what we got, and actually I would have liked it if we had a shorter lead up and then more time in that big bang, because it was such a big bang that I wanted to really unpick it, and that's where kind of all the horror lay in this story, and I wanted to linger over the horror elements rather than it being done so quickly because it was all built up towards the end. What I did like about this one is this woman kind of feeling these feelings for the first time, and how she just feels so off kilter and out of her box, but is learning to enjoy having a crush on a woman and what that goes towards. And I also did like how this built up. There were several red flags along the journey, and she just did not see them, and it was painstaking knowing that something terrible was going to happen, because definitely it does not seem right. I don't think there's much more I can say about this one. It was just a very good time, but it did whiz by a little bit too quickly, and I did just want it to get to the point and then spend more time at that point rather than wrapping it up so fast. That said, the ending is certainly chilling and is worth it, because I liked what we got of the horror elements at the end. I just wish we were there for longer. I read a young adult graphic novel memoir, and that is Homebody by Theo Parish. This is Theo's story about discovering themselves and discovering that they're non-binary and trans, and how they progressed on that journey, what they did, and what it means to be trans. And it's in this lovely graphic novel that has a really like cool blue and purple color palette, and I think this is the perfect one for teenagers and young readers to kind of understand what non-binary means, to understand what trans means, and also just to recognize and be able to understand what that journey is like for someone who's going through it, if they got a friend who's going through it, for example, so they can better support them and know what to do and what not to do in a very friendly way. I felt like this one is, although it doesn't pretend that transphobia doesn't exist, it's a bit softer on the transphobia, so it feels like something that somebody who is going through that journey could read without getting too triggered by too much transphobia being included. That's just my take as someone who is not trans. And I felt like it explained everything very clearly, very steadily, but it also felt very inviting. Theo is talking about themselves in a way that feels very comfortable, like they are happy with where they are and they're wanting to share and they're wanting to tell you about it. And so it's almost like having a conversation with Theo. The artwork itself is really nice. It's kind of in that style of Heartstopper, so it's very Heartstopper-esque art style, if that makes any sense. And also I really like the font in this. I think font in graphic novels is a big deal, but this font was quite easy to read and I quite liked it. And so I just had a really nice afternoon reading this all in one go, learning about Theo's story, getting to know them, and the ending itself is such a nice warm celebration of that feeling of I am comfortable with who I am and I'm happy in my body. And I think I've never felt that gender euphoria that Theo Parish is talking about to the degree that Theo has, because Theo's been on this whole journey of trying to get to that point. But I think this is something that translates that feeling of gender euphoria to the reader, and I felt that happiness. I felt happy with Theo, for that journey that they have come through. And so I really liked how this one ended in such a heartwarming and hopeful note, and I'm just so glad that this graphic novel is out there for more teenagers to be able to read it and experience it. So then we get to Fair Rosaline by Natasha Solomons. This is a retelling of Romeo and Juliet from the perspective of Rosaline, and especially interesting to see Rosaline's perspective because in the original play Romeo is fully in love with Rosaline before he moves on to Juliet, and it's about why he moves on, what Romeo is really like, and also what Rosaline is experiencing in this whole process. Now, I always yabber on about how I'm not a historical fiction reader, but turns out I can be if you put a bit of Shakespeare into that historical fiction, and this one was just a really fun read to me. Even though I don't think it's the best book ever, I personally had such a good time with it because it's like written for me. It's written for those people who are the big Shakespeare fans, who just enjoy everything to do with Shakespeare. So this one paints Romeo as a bit of a villain, as a bit of a playboy, as someone who is intentionally hurting these girls that he is kind of using, and maybe he thinks he's falling really in love with them, but the way that he picks them up and discards them is not that great. And there's a much bigger conspiracy going on behind the whole thing, as Rosaline discovers as she goes through this book. Now, what I liked about it was the Shakespeareanness of it, of course. It was fun to see the iconic lines being twisted and turned to mean different things and to see them being included. It was nice to kind of follow along with what was happening, because of course if you're reading this you probably have an idea of the play, and so you can pick up the elements of this is what point we're at in the play, this is what point we are at in now, and it was fun to follow that along. I also really liked that we got a bit more characterization on Tybalt and Rosaline in particular. While this Rosaline didn't feel like the Rosaline that we see in the play, we don't get to see much of her to be fair, that Tybalt felt very authentic, and I really liked her take on Tybalt. I also really liked her take on the friar, because I think Shakespeare particularly purposefully puts in clueless friars who just want to make people fake their deaths, even though that's probably not going to work out well. And so I liked this representation of the friar, I liked this representation of Tybalt, and I found Rosaline to just be an okay character to follow. She wasn't particularly my favourite, and I don't think this book particularly revolutionised my take on Rosaline. And there were some downsides to this. This book did kind of shoehorn Rosaline into situations in the play that she definitely wouldn't have been at, but we need her to be there so that we as readers can see them unfold. So at some points it did feel a bit unnatural, and like the story was kind of being manipulated into the shapes that it needed to be for us to see the beats of the story that the author wanted us to see. And it is a little bit slow, it does get a bit laggy, and I don't think I'm gonna remember this book in like 2 years' time. However, I had a good time reading it, and sometimes I like reading a book where I can just enjoy it in this moment for now, and that's what Fair Rosaline gave me. So I would recommend this to you if you are a big fan of the play Romeo and Juliet, and if you like historical fiction. I think this could be fun, but it's a bit predictable. We all know the play, we all kind of know the narrative that it's loosely going to follow, and even though this does do something different, I kind of saw where this was going. We've now made it to the part of the video where I talk about books that are very different from all the ones that I've talked about before. Yes friends, we've come to the Sierra Simone section of this video, but it's not just Sierra Simone. I read 2 books which are by Sierra Simone and Laurelin Paige. They are co-written, and I'm going to start by talking to you about Hot Cop, which I just haven't read an indie book with abs on the cover for such a long time, and I actually felt so happy going back to my roots. So Hot Cop is about, it's about Liv, who is this woman who doesn't want a man. She doesn't want a relationship, but you know what she really wants? She really wants a baby. And so she decides that she just needs to find a man who will have sex with her until she gets pregnant and then cut him off. Cue in our main character here, who's a very hot cop that she meets at the school some point, and who is really into her and really wants to sleep with her, and then they have a dinner, and she presents this proposition of, how about we have as much sex as you want and I get pregnant, and then you just like relinquish all your fatherly responsibilities to me and continue being the bachelor that you are. And he says yes, and it's about their romance. But actually I feel like this one is more about the process of what it means when you're trying to conceive and conception. And so I give this book 5 stars. It became a new favorite because I had so much fun with this book. It's very, very steamy. There's so much sex. There's like loads of sex. There's loads of good sex. It's really descriptive. It's really fun to read. If that's what you're looking for in your romance books, you're going to get a whole load of it here and more. And it just goes to show how much sex you need to have to conceive, or if you definitely want to do it very quickly. I particularly like this book though because it does talk about the highs and the lows. Yes, they get to have loads of sex, and yes, it's a lot of fun for them, but it also goes to show how constricted they are in what they can do, because they can't be too creative with it. They can't have too much fun, you know. They've got an end goal that they are working towards. Also, they're not people who really know each other, and so you get to see their relationship and their feelings catching and forming over the course of this novel. And I particularly enjoyed Liv's character development, because to me at the beginning she's got this fear which seems like a silly fear to me, but I know that a lot of people actually have this fear, and she learns a lot throughout the course of this novel. She learns a lot about what it means to be independent but also to rely on others and to open yourself up to that reliability, and how scary that is and how emotional it is and how much hard work that really is to do, but also to overcome the particular fear that she is facing in this one. Not to say that our main guy character, what's his name again? Yes, Officer Kelly. It's not to say that Kelly doesn't have to go through any character development as well. He comes to some slow realizations, and actually he's the one who has all of the romance like trapped in him that he didn't know he had before. And I loved him as a character. He was so funny and he was so playful, and he loosened Liv up, and they are the perfect pairing for each other. I really believed in their romance element, which I find so interesting because like the sex was the first and foremost thing that you were getting, so to see the relationship kind of form underneath that was actually really beautiful and really, really cute as well. But that is to say, back to what I was saying, you do get to experience the lows when you're hoping for conception and then your period comes, that kind of guttering feeling of failure, and the fact that she's trying to keep this a secret from her friends and from everybody around her, and how scary it is in some ways as well, and how scary it can be. I really, really liked this. It is also a librarian who is falling for a cop, and then you later realise when you read the author's note that Sierra Simone was a librarian and that her husband was a cop, is a cop. So I'm just saying. Oh, and that leads me to a very important thing that I cannot forget to mention. So this book was published, I think it's important to note, this book was published before the murder of George Floyd, where a lot of the spotlight was put on cop romances and kind of what that means, especially as we have these opinions of over-policing, and especially when it comes to race. And what I really liked about this book is that even though it became before that big discussion kind of kicked off on an international level, it addresses this. It addresses the issues with cops, it addresses the issues with racism, and it discusses that, and it's part of the novel. And I appreciated that that was all something that Sierra Simone and Laurelin Paige was thinking about and considering when writing a cop romance book before it was trendy and necessary to do so. It goes to show that they are clued in to cop culture, and also just like are not afraid to they're not shying away from that very important discussion. Gave this book 5 stars, absolutely loved it. And now we're moving on to the last book of this wrap up. More abs. This one is called Pornstar. Can't believe we're going to review this. So this book is about 2 porn stars who fall in love with each other, and it's largely about whether they can continue making porn on their in their individual spaces, but also together when they're navigating a relationship with each other. We have a Persian female lead, and we also have our main character, Logan Toole, and I really loved this book. I also gave it 5 stars. This one, I just have to make this comparison because I want people to understand, even though this book is called Pornstar, this one is more romantic than Hot Cop, and actually they have more sex in Hot Cop than they have in Pornstar. Just saying. Possibly if you're trying to conceive, you might be having more sex than Pornstars. Just saying. Just saying. So you can tell that the authors have done their research when they were writing Pornstar, because this book celebrates the industry while not shying away from the problems within the porn star industry. So it's celebrating porn as in like it's a fun job to have. They talk about the ways that they each enjoy their respective jobs and what they like about it, and you can see that Logan specifically really loves his job, getting to direct it, getting to look at film angles and lighting and the people that he gets to work with. He is also someone who's really passionate about having a more ethically diverse porn, and the porn industry is doing well on that. There's feminist porn, there's environmental porn, and so it's about how great the porn industry can be, but at the same time it does not shy away from the fact, and it addresses the fact that there is a lot of issues around consent in porn industry, how sexual assault does happen, and how there is a lot of exoticizing and fetishizing of people, races, for the sake of churning out diverse porn. So this book manages to include all of those elements in it. So it's talking about everything that's great and wonderful about the porn industry, while also just showing these two people who are falling in love. Logan in particular has just gone through a big breakup of a long-term serious relationship, and you get to see him kind of going through his emotions around that, while also starting to feel already emotions for somebody else, and how he's a bit cautious and a bit nervous about doing things right, about not making it be a rebound. And Devi, who is our female main character, kind of learns a lot about herself and what she wants in life, and as soon as she falls in love, she starts questioning if the porn industry is what she wants to be in, and if she can navigate that, and if that's something she even wants to attempt. And so what I really appreciate about this romance book in particular is that it's putting a spotlight on an industry that's often seen as taboo and not something that you can write a book about, but it's also really giving these two characters space to grow individually while also growing through the relationship that they have, and it gives them time to kind of make those choices, and it shows that you can have that time. You don't have to rush into anything. And I really appreciated how realistic this felt, how romantic it managed to feel, while also showing that you can have a book with loads and loads and loads of steam in it and loads of hot sex, and yet it feels as romantic as this one did. By the end of it, when everything was coming together, I was smiling, I was laughing, I was kicking my feet because I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cute, and it slowly won me over. I just finished reading Hot Cop, and I could not believe the chemistry between Liv and Officer Kelly in that book, and I was thinking I could not like a couple as much as those two, with their playfulness and how they loosen each other up and make each other just better people. And then I read Pornstar, and I ended up falling for this romantic pairing as well, and so I ended this reading period, or as I should say, like my reading week, feeling like, oh my gosh, I believe in love again. That's what these books showed me. I also forgot to mention, I'm sorry, I'm flipping between the two. I read Hot Cop in under 12 hours because I could not stop reading. It had that addictive quality to it. I was reading this, I mistakenly started at 11 p.m. I did not get to sleep until 4 a.m. and then I woke up at 7 a.m. and I kept reading, and I finished by 11 a.m. Under 12 hours, 3 hours sleep because I needed to sleep, but I did not want to because I wanted to read this book. And Pornstar took me a little bit more time because I was so broken after not having slept from reading this one, but I still thoroughly enjoyed both of these books. Highly recommend, and you'll be supporting indie authors if you read them. Bring back abs on the cover, that's all I'm going to say to finish off. So there you have it. Those are 10 books that I recently read and my thoughts on them. Please let me know in the comment section down below. Have you read any of these books? Are you planning to read any of these books? And recommend me one romance book that made you believe in love again. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!